There's something about the 1963 Stingray in particular that makes it stand out above all other sports cars.
I could not believe how that car caught my eye and didn't let me look away.
If it had not been for Bill Mitchell, this car would never exist.
The 63 Stingray made history. It will live forever because of its impact to the industry in the sports car field.
Very few car designs transcend their era and leave a lasting mark. But within each style line, there's history to be told. And the 1963 Stingray is no exception.
You know, there's something about the classics that represents the American spirit.
My dad's story is inspiring. He started from nothing and was able to leave a lasting mark in the automotive industry. Now, he's preserving history, one vehicle at a time. This is the story of a car that shaped the future of American automotive design, the 1963 Corvette Stingray. Even though this is one of the most well-known classic cars in the world, it was almost never made.
The Corvette came out in 1953, and it was designed to attract sports car people. And the sports car people became alive in America because of the Second World War. The Americans in Europe were exposed to sports cars. So coming back to America, they wanted this. And so General Motors stepped up.
Prior to that point, all cars had been designed by engineers. There hadn't even been a director of design at General Motors. Harley Earl, who was the guy, let's call him the father of design, the guy that invented automotive design, really. He literally created General Motors styling. It was called the Art and Color Department. And now that he was retiring, he had pretty much decided that that whole importance of guiding the company was going to transition to his right-hand man, was a guy named William Bill Mitchell. Bill Mitchell was probably one of the most powerful guys I've ever worked for, and a guy that loved cars. I'm Peter Brock. I'm probably best known publicly for things I've done in automotive design, but I really consider myself kind of a historian in automotive art. I love automobiles, and also the overall exterior design has always been important to me because that's more of an aesthetic. So it's a combination of aesthetics and engineering that's really guided my direction and the things that I've done in my life.
My dad and Bill Mitchell are cut from the same cloth because they both love vehicles more than anything.
A lot of people don't know that I started a company called Bushwhacker. I started Bushwhacker out of my garage and was with it for 48 years. I came up with a thing called a fender flare. And the reason it was named Bushwhacker is because we were making products at that time strictly for off-road vehicles. The Corvette endured through all of the ups and downs of Detroit. However, Corvette needed to come out of that old look that they started with and to really make it into a more worldwide sports car.
He wanted to create some automobile that was completely different in an idea and aesthetics. I can't tell you how exciting that is when you have a chance to build something that is going to turn into a real car on the street. This is something that thousands of people are going to see eventually.
In 1957, General Motors hired a 19-year-old designer, the youngest in company history. That designer was Peter Brock.
At the same time, there was a real problem from the standpoint of product liability in Detroit.
Because illegal street racing was increasing in popularity, public safety reached a tipping point on American roads. The fallout of all of this was the AMA ban. The Automobile Manufacturers Association outlawed sports car production.
The collateral damage in this was the Corvette program. That was the end of the Corvette program. As far as they were concerned, the program was gone. It had been cut off. It was never going to happen again. They were not going to be involved in racing. But Bill Mitchell had been there long enough to realize that over time, everything changes and goes back to whatever is successful and sells automobiles. He personally decided that he would go against management and design a new Corvette in secret. So I arrived at that time when this was going on. That individual had that much power and vision to change the corporation and decide to build a Corvette in secret. Now, he could not go upstairs to the Chevrolet studio to do that. He came downstairs to where the advanced concept was. Management never really comes down there. This was the one place that Bill Mitchell could go and present his idea for a new Corvette and know that he could develop it in secret. Here I was in advanced concept. I'd only been there a few months, and Bill Mitchell walks in. He says, "Guys, come on over here, sit down. I want to tell you what I want to do." Now, he wants to make a statement. This is going to be a breakaway from all the previous work that had been done there. And we're looking at each other going, Bill Mitchell wants us to design the new Corvette.
So he was looking for more concepts, drawing
He
wise.
wanted everybody to try every possible thing, and he would pick the stuff out. He realized stuff that was too far out. Some of it was difficult, even to think about doing, but you have to reach, you have to try, and put stuff out there and see what it looks like. We knew at that time that there was going to be a real change on the car.
These young guys, they wanted to put their fingerprint on the automotive industry. And here they're given this amazing opportunity to design the next Corvette.
The lines on a Stingray coupe were so dramatic, swooping, sloping, slippery looking. The car, standing still, looked like it was moving.
Bill Mitchell comes back into the studio after about a week, and he slowly walks around the room, looks at all these sketches on the wall, and stops at one sketch and said, this is looking pretty good. He says, who did this? Okay, he says, great.
He liked it because of the fenders, how they were bulged, and how the line between the fenders kept the fenders together.
He says, all right, I want you to be the lead designer on this project.
It's pretty incredible to think that Peter Brock was only 20 years old when he sketched the original concept for the Corvette Stingray. And that's a sketch that Bill Mitchell literally picked off of the wall that would go on to inspire car designers for generations to come.
So you got to realize that Bill Mitchell is the designer. What we are is the guys that are illustrating his ideas for him. This car's form developed over a period of time. So this is quite an early sketch. You can see this is 9/24/57. So this is a couple of months before we got the final design.
General Motors eventually figured out that Bill Mitchell was working on a new Corvette concept in secret.
Bill Mitchell was not just a good designer, he was an extraordinary designer. He took that under his own wing, presented it to GM. They went crazy. You know, they weren't sure they were going to continue the Corvette. And this is the way Bill Mitchell said, yes, you are. Yes, you are. And he did a great job because he had that eye and he had that goal in his soul to create and make it work.
Management liked what they discovered behind the scenes and decided to let Bill Mitchell continue with development under two conditions. First, he would have to finance the concept himself, and second, he couldn't use the Corvette name.
So at that point, he had to back up and say, okay, we can't finish the thing up in coupe form because building a coupe is about 3 times more complicated than building a roadster. Since he's paying for it himself, he said, we're going to do this as a roadster. So this is where we developed what became the XP87. And ultimately, that's what the C2 is. Bill Mitchell, being a deep sea fisherman, loved going down to Florida. And so he named the car the Stingray. I mean, that had sort of a magical thing to him, this beautiful thing that flowed through the water and stuff. So the lines of the Stingray all the way around and the sharp tail and stuff on it. Automotive design it's a study in compromises. There are so many different things that can change in the development of an automobile.
Zora Duntov, who was the chief engineer at GM during this time, deserves a lot of credit for the success of the Corvette.
Tell me, what do you think about acceleration and traction?
He was constantly pushing the limits of not only the engineering, but the performance of the Stingray. His background as a European engineer and as a race car driver at Le Mans added a ton of value to the performance and design of the '63 Corvette.
And this was Zora's main thing all the time that he was working at General Motors, was constantly trying to improve the Corvette. And he was constantly butting heads, of course, with the bean counters because anything that he wanted to do was going to be more expensive. So there was always this limitation of what could happen with the car. But if it had not been for Zora, the car would not have progressed and progressed and progressed. The important thing is here, we had a strong leader with Bill Mitchell and what he wanted for that car. That doesn't mean that the design group around him agreed with everything he was doing. In fact, we fought with him on several things.
One of the things that they famously disagreed on was the split window design, which only ended up being offered for the first year of production. But it came to be known as one of the most defining features of the vehicle.
Bill had a great love of the great classic cars that were done during the 30s, and one of his favorite was the Bugatti with a split window in the back end. When I'd finished the car up as a coupe, and he said, okay, now I want you to model that as 2 separate windows. We're going to have a separate window on either side.
Zora Duntov, who was the chief engineer, didn't want it because it was hindering to the driver. They couldn't see out the rear window.
Duntov comes in, and I remember, in this wonderful Russian accent. I mean, he was just absolutely apoplectic. What is this? And it turns into this giant shouting match. And the bottom end of it is that Mitchell throws Zora out of the studio and says, I don't want you coming back in here. This is my car, and you don't have anything to say about it. And he was absolutely right, because he had built the car on his own money, and Chevrolet Engineering had not put a dime into the car, so they didn't have a word to say about it. And as much as Zora didn't like the car, that's the way it was going to be.
He pushed the limits of what was possible. And I think that was part of why he butted heads with Bill Mitchell. It was because he wanted certain things performance-wise, and Bill Mitchell wanted certain things aesthetically speaking. And the two are not necessarily compatible.
So that's why this car is such an iconic design of Bill Mitchell, because it is reflected with all the details he had on it, primarily the split window.
How sad is that, how the next year, the new model came out, and it didn't have the split window, it had one piece.
One window.
And so people that had the first model with the split window were cutting it out and then putting the one piece in.
Yes.
And they had no idea what they were doing at the time.
This makes this car.
And you instantly know what it is.
You know exactly what that car is once you see this.
There are a lot of really unique features in the 1963 Stingray, one of which would be the hideaway headlamps, which became a trademark for the Corvette all the way until the 2005 version.
It wasn't just the car, lines. They made the suspension on that car independent rear suspension, independent front suspension.
Up to this point, they had solid axles, which made for a rough ride, and when cornering could cause some problems.
So it just really rode wonderful, and it cornered immaculately.
The 1963 Stingray also had some really top-of-the-line engine packages if you wanted to splurge and you wanted the fastest Corvette. You could have a fuel-injected V8 with 360 horsepower. To have that kind of horsepower in a small car, even in today's standards, that's a lot of muscle power to get you down the road.
And you know, all Corvettes are fiberglass.
Yeah.
Yeah, SMC, slush mold compound, with small fibers with the resin, and they're made very nicely
Yeah.
in today's environment. It's carrying less weight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which means faster car?
Faster go-kart. Yep.
If you look at the car and look at that tapered line that goes all the way around, what we call the belt line in the studio, it tapers off toward the back end. When we finally got the sketch that Bill Mitchell finally picked off the wall, you can see this car is clear up in November 22nd, 57. So it's 2 months between that thing and this thing. And during that period of time, there were all kinds of sketches and ideas before we did it. But as I was telling you earlier, this particular belt line here is much lower in the front and higher in the back end. And I was trying to get Bill to do that because I knew aerodynamically that would work out a lot better. You know, finally at that point, after gently trying to put that idea across, he says, you know, kid, I want you to understand that I designed the Corvettes around here. Now just do what I tell you. The other thing that was really interesting is that, again, cost became a factor on the car. And as you look around at this Stingray, you'll see that there are various vents on the car, on the side front fenders and on the C-pillar in the back. Those are phony vents. It used to drive us nuts that those weren't functional. So when Bill would come into the studio, he'd want to put all these little things on the car, and it would just drive us crazy because we were trying to keep the form as pure and as functional as possible. His point was that when the people walk into a showroom and walk around the car, there has to be certain points of interest that they talk about. So we had a special word for these, and we called those surface entertainment. But they did sell cars.
See all that's new from Chevrolet. And for you who really love to drive, listen. Your symphony begins. Chevrolet's Super Sports for 1963. The new Corvette Stingray. Ramjet fuel injection V8. In this Corvette.
The impression of the Stingray when it first arrived on the street to the public absolutely changed people's thinking of what General Motors cars were going to be like for the future.
As far as I'm concerned, when I first saw the Stingray, and even today, I think that's an iconic car. It's going to be loved today and tomorrow.
It's such a beautiful car, and it was beautiful in 1963, and it's beautiful today.
It was the first time that General Motors had made money on the Corvette program. I think they sold 10,000 units immediately on it.
As I understand, in '63, they sold about the same amount of convertibles as they did the coupe. I think I can understand that because the convertible was always there, but now there's a coupe. And it became one of the big sellers.
My dad's collection shows you how much he loves cars. It shows you how much he loves the people that develop those cars and the entire industry around automotive engineering.
Over the years, I've had the opportunity to collect vehicles that are special. What I love about cars is like art. I think cars are a rolling art. And that's what I try to create when I build a car. One of the pieces of rolling art that I feel has come about in years past is the '63 Corvette Stingray split window coupe.
When my dad decided to restore his current Stingray, there were several design features that he wanted to modify to make it his very own. It's his way of putting his personal touch, or signature in a sense, on the vehicle.
The first thing that came to my mind is, I'm going to lower it.
He lowers every vehicle, it seems like, and he did the same thing with the Stingray.
I didn't want to do the white wall because the white wall takes away from the visual of the rim.
He had the tires scrubbed and then went for a sleek silver and gray on the rims that still fits with the overall look and feel of the car.
The scoops were a little bland.
One of his ideas was to take these non-functioning vents and scoops and give them a stainless steel accent, and he even went as far as putting wire mesh underneath them to make them look like they were actually functional. This was my dad's version of adding his own surface entertainment to the vehicle. My dad will tell you that he never liked the door handles on the original vehicle.
Never liked the door handles. There's a friend of mine in Utah, Dave Kindig, and he makes these handles that are flush with the body. And I thought those were really slick, so I put those on the car. The interior was black. I tore that interior out, put in midnight blue interior.
It seems like a subtle change, but my dad actually owned a silver '63 Stingray back in the 1970s before he had this one. And that one actually got stolen more than once. So the choice for a midnight blue interior is a nod to his old vehicle. The original color of the car was Sebring Silver, one of the 7 original options. But my dad, of course, had to put his touch on it. He used a custom fine silver from PPG paint, and it just gives it that smooth, glossy appearance.
And then the windows, they're glass and it's tinted glass. It's not a film, it's actually in the glass.
The way my dad described the car to me when he saw it for the first time after it was finished can only be described in one word.
Wow, that stance was the first thing that grabbed me. And when I looked at that paint, it just popped.
In general, I mean, it's amazing, and I think the reaction to it is, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter old and young alike, everybody that sees the Stingray just loves it.
This car was so different than anything that was out there. I mean, it was, everybody remembers that car from the first time they saw it.
This car was always something that I enjoyed. I bought a 63 back in the day.
Yeah.
And in fact, I drove that from the Chicago area out to Portland when I moved out there. Of course, going across country in that car in 1964, It got a lot of looks.
What's great about my dad's collection of cars is that there are so many stories about each one.
My first Stingray was a Roadster. It was red in color with a black leather interior. I was late in my 20s when I got married, and my wife and I decided that we wanted to get as far away from our in-laws as we could. So we picked Portland, Oregon. We load up this U-Haul, and I'm a brave soul. I got this Corvette. I'm gonna go through the Rockies. Well, I didn't get very far out of Cicero. The Corvette didn't move the trailer. The trailer moved the Corvette. So I decided, we're gonna ship the stuff. This car came with a 327 V8 engine with a 2-speed Powerglide automatic transmission. The engine that I selected for this car was a 350 crate engine from Chevrolet Parts Department. I decided to do fuel injected, so I did the Ramjet. But instead of having the Ram in the front, I changed it to the side, and it makes it look like the original Corvette fuel injection. I put a lot of chrome. So when you lift the hood on this dude, when you open that hood, it smiles back at you, but you smile because what you're looking at is so awesome.
The changes that my dad makes to the vehicle a lot of times are very subtle, but to car collectors, maybe they're over the top.
I do get a little feedback from some people out there that take a look at some of these classic cars that I own. But normally, most people will say when they see a car that I put my signature on, that's the way it should have came from the factory.
Bill Mitchell really had an incredible vision for what would ultimately become the Stingray. And as I learn more about my dad and his passion for cars, I see that he has a similar vision as an automotive innovator. And ever since he saw the 1963 Stingray, he had a vision in his mind to make it his very own.
Jerry's vision of what the car should be, I think he's right on. For the one thing is that he's taken those things and he's made them functional to a certain extent. He's also accented them a little bit, which Mitchell would have loved on it. Had he gone back and shown this car to Mitchell in 1963, I think it would have gotten great approval.
I love cars because of my dad. Riding along with my dad was always an experience because he was teaching me life's things as we drove along. Of course, the birds and the bees, but he would, be honest in what you do, and a shake of the hand is a contract, and you need to honor that.
Yeah, there was 5 kids. I was the last. And there's only one seat in the Corvette, so whenever Dad went somewhere, you wanted to be in that seat. You wanted to be in the passenger seat. And that was always like something we fought over. We just wanted to go ride with Dad in the Corvette. I remember this really cool picture I saw when I was, I don't know, I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, and I'm washing my dad's white Corvette. And I saw that picture, and I could go back to that day, and I remembered. Yeah, I remembered washing that vehicle. I don't know why that stands out to me. Yeah, it was just me and my dad. When you think about Corvette, you automatically just think of the iconic American sports car. And it's carried through to today. In 2020, Chevrolet unveiled the C8 Corvette, the first mid-engine production car they would release to the public. A vehicle that Zora Duntov would have been proud of.
The 2020 Corvette is a work of art.
The C8 is an amazing piece of engineering. GM outdid themselves.
We've all been waiting for it since Zora decided that he wanted to have a mid-engine car back in 1957. And General Motors has gone through a number of mid-engine Corvettes.
I think they did everything they could with the C5, C6, C7. And they were great cars. It's taken this long for the powers to be to say, now's the time.
The main advantage that we've had over this period of time is primarily from an engineering standpoint. But I know from a standpoint of the way cars get designed at General Motors, there's a lot of input from people, so there's again compromises that go on it. It's going to get refined in the next couple of seasons, and it's going to keep getting better and better, and that also goes for the engineering. It's really excellent now, and all it can do is get better. So I'd like to own one. You know, that's all you can say.
When the brand new C8 Corvettes came out, they were really hard to get your hands on at the dealerships. But my dad found one down in Florida, and so we took the opportunity to travel down there together to pick it up. After we picked up the C8 Miami, we had a once-in-a-lifetime invitation to visit the Kennedy Space Center and drive both of the vehicles out there. Corvettes and the space program have always kind of had this unique connection. So it was really fun to go there to see the historic place. And they also let us drive the cars as fast as we wanted to go on the shuttle landing strip.
Thinking back, when that C2 came out, it was space time.
You know, the vehicle then became popular and synonymous with the space race and everything that NASA was doing.
What an awesome venture this is.
I think I got the C8 up to Definitely over 150 miles an hour. And I kind of backed off because I'd never driven a car that fast before.
I have to say, driving the C2 and my son in the C8 Corvette at the Space Center was an event that I'll never forget.
You know, they say if you just keep moving, you never grow old, and that's what the cars do for my dad. This C2 Corvette's very important to him because it's nostalgic on many different levels. Because when he sees this vehicle, when he drives it, I think it takes him back to when he was young. I think Corvette and GM, they need to continue to push that envelope of performance. And they need to have those people that are passionate, just like Bill Mitchell, on the design side, like Peter Brock, trying to push that form, but then also have that balance of someone like Zora Duntov, the engineer that is pushing the boundaries of performance.
Time is the only judge of good design, and great design lasts forever because there's a universal appeal that it attracts people, and it has that aesthetic form that people agree on that makes the car successful. And that has certainly happened with the split window Corvette. It has become the most beautiful form of its particular time.
It became known as a world-class sports car.
And to have been a part of that, you know, is just really exciting for me still. I see the car on the road and I love it.
Corvette is going to be around for a long, long time. And this one is going to be known forever.